Recently, Dr. George Huang published an article online titled, "Health Matters, Depression and Anxiety Rise During COVID-19." In that article, he notes nearly 30% of Americans are experiencing symptoms of clinical depression as of late July, compared to 6.6% last year, based on a recent National for Health Statistics and Census Bureau. Furthermore, the numbers for anxiety closely mirror, with 36% compared to 8.2% last year. The number of online mental health screenings this year has increased 400%. And he notes perhaps the most alarming, albeit uncited, statistic comes from the CDC director, who stated that there have been far greater suicides and drug overdoses than COVID deaths among young people since the lockdown. Now, there are various reasons as to why we can become depressed. Perhaps it's due to the isolation we find ourselves in right now. Maybe it's the idea of the threat of losing a job, or maybe you've already lost your job. Perhaps it's the idea of more responsibility, creating more stress that leads to depression. I don't know. You get online and you research this, you'll find a lot of coping mechanisms or things that professional health experts give as to how to better handle depression. Things such as finding joy in the simple things that we never previously found joy in, expressing our gratitude more frequently, taking care of our body in the sense of getting the right amount of exercise or sleep. All those things, by the way, are likely biblical principles. But here's something that I want you to understand. It's not a sin in and of itself to be depressed. In fact, some of the greatest individuals in Scripture dealt with depression. For instance, you read about David over and over again in the book of Psalms. There was a guy who was depressed more than once in his life, clearly, or down in the dumps. You think of individuals like his son Solomon, the last book he wrote, the book of Ecclesiastes, a guy who hated his life and in one sense wished he were dead. That idea of being so depressed they're wishing you were dead was no different. You see it in the life of Elijah when he was severely depressed, the prophet Jeremiah, and in Job as well. Yet in all of these individuals, I'll tell you something that's interesting for your own study that I have found, is every time that these individuals were depressed, you find some solutions in Scripture with these individuals to see them out of their depression. For instance, with Elijah, sometime when you get the chance, read 1 Kings chapter 19. For not only do you see all of the clear symptoms of depression in Elijah's life, I mean severe clinical depression, but you also see solutions as to how God helped him out of his depression. And it's rather fascinating when you look at that. But there's one thing that I think in a time of depression that we need to cling on to as a Christian, and that is hope. And perhaps I think it's that idea of hope may help us more than anything else. Now, what do I mean by hope? The word is a desire and expectation. It's the idea of always having something to look forward to. But more specifically, when I think about hope as a Christian, I'm not speaking of something in this life. If you ask, well, I hope 6 months from now things are going to get better and things are going to be back to normal. Well, I kind of hope so too, but I don't know the future, and I can't promise that, and neither can you. Things 6 years from now may be much worse than what they are right now. And so banking on things getting better in this life is not the kind of hope that actually I'm speaking of, and especially in a time of depression. But I'm speaking of a hope that goes beyond this life. Let me share with you a passage of Scripture. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, in verse 13, the Apostle Paul says this. He says, "But I do not want you to be ignorant or unaware, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, that is, those who have died, lest you," watch this, "sorrow as others who have no hope." Now, it appears in the first century, some of the Christians at Thessalonica were concerned about the second coming of Christ, and in relation to Jesus' return of those who have died. Because those who have died, are they going to miss out on the second coming? And so are they going to miss out on the eternal reward as well? And Paul says, don't sorrow as those who have no hope. Now, for our understanding today, one of the concepts of depression is the idea of there is no more hope. We've lost all hope, and that's why we're depressed. But look at verse 14. Notice it says, "For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, Even so, God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. For our understanding today, because Jesus rose from the dead as Christians, we have hope. We will always have something to look forward to, no matter how down, no matter how dark this life gets. Hope. Let me share with you one more passage of Scripture. In John chapter 16 and verse 33, Jesus says this, and it's good to remember. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. Jesus says, I have overcome the world.